Welcome back to the Assertive podcast. I'm Erica.
I'm Jess.
And we are licensed professional counselors in Texas, reviewing Am I the Asshole Reddit threads to help you learn skills for communication, healthy boundary setting, and assertive interpersonal functioning. Today, we're looking at rigid versus assertive boundaries, inappropriate guilt, and your natural support systems. We're going to be doing this with a post titled, Am I the Asshole for Setting Strong Boundaries with My Mom?
The author writes, I'm 38 with parents who are both in their mid-60s. My parents live in a small town about 30 minutes away. They are obsessed with their church. When COVID first came out, I caught it and got very sick. I survived, but my kidneys were damaged and ended up completely failing. I've been on dialysis for the past few years. My parents have not been helpful at all and have not cared to understand what I'm going through. My mom told someone, the author has to do this dialysis thing for a few weeks and then he will be all better. Of course, that is not true. In December of 2022, my wife called me from work and said she was not feeling well and needed me to come take her to the hospital. Long story short, she ended up having a kidney stone that was stuck and caused her to be septic. The hospital could not treat her properly, and they wanted to transport her by ambulance to another hospital. When they loaded her up, she was white as a ghost, and I was terrified. I called my mom and asked her to pick up our kids, they're 12 and 9, from school and keep them for a few hours. My brother, who lives closer to me and to the kids' school, was going to pick them up after work and stay with them for the night. All my mom had to do was keep them for about 3 hours. She picked up my kids and brought them to her house. They were there for about an hour, and she announced to them that she was leaving. The church was having a Christmas party for adults only, and she wasn't going to miss it, so she left my kids alone. I found out about it because my youngest called me scared and crying. It was awful. I'd been up for 24 hours straight. I was stuck in another city. I'd missed my dialysis treatment, and my wife was in surgery. I called my brother, and he left work to get them. My wife was okay once they removed the stone and cleaned up the infection. My mom thinks she did nothing wrong because, quote, the church needed me. So now we get to the am I the asshole part. I found a kidney donor, and I'm scheduled to get a kidney transplant in July. The transplant will take place in the same city where they took my wife, about 2 hours away from our house. I will be there for 3 to 4 weeks for recovery. As soon as I found out the donor was a match, I told everyone, and my mom said she would keep the kids for us. I told her no. I told her she abandoned my kids and left them scared and alone, and I could not trust her because she always put the church first. Now she is mad at me and says I'm being an asshole. She says if I don't let her watch the kids, it'll make her look bad to her church friends. I don't care how it makes her look. I only care about making sure my kids are taken care of. I also took that time to tell her I don't want her around my kids right now. I have too much going on. I'm still sick and dealing with my health. And every time my mom is around, it adds stress and things get very complicated. Am I the asshole for setting a strong boundary with my mom and not letting her around my family while I recover?
It's a good one.
Yeah. It's agitating to read that.
What are your initial thoughts for this one?
They're not very therapeutic. My initial thoughts were like, this is why people hate Christians, but neither here nor there. It's like that kind of shit. I mean, my initial one, I think most people, when they're sick, if anybody's going to be concerned, we expect it to be our moms. And I think that's got to be really hurtful to have like your family minimize the severity of like your kidney failure and then prioritize something pretty stupid and like a legitimate crisis. So I'm pretty disappointed in mom's priorities, I guess was my first thought.
Yeah. Party over her grandkids.
Yeah, that's not like typical mom behavior, I think. I think we all want to rely on our moms.
Are you familiar with emotionally immature parents?
Ooh, maybe that I can kind of grasp the concept, but I haven't heard that explicitly. Tell me about that.
Basically what it sounds like. Parents who have really low emotional IQs and they struggle with being able to meet the emotional needs of their kids. And a lot of times they actually require their emotional needs to be met by their kids, or they're just emotionally unavailable. So maybe they're gone a lot for work, or they're emotionally distanced and they're like, go away. I don't have time for this, or I don't want to talk about this. This is stupid.
Yeah, does that come out a lot when the kids are more emotionally intelligent or not so much?
I feel like the kids end up becoming more emotionally mature because of that, because they learn to read their parents' kind of state of mood.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
so they learn how to adjust and respond accordingly. This is also where a lot of like codependency with parents, I think, can come into play. And for people who maybe struggle with setting boundaries with parents, could be because they feel parental love is conditional upon how well the child can meet their emotional needs.
Gosh, so you think that might be going on here where mom is pretty kind of just she's not, I mean, she sounds pretty selfish, just kind of egocentric, maybe kind
Yes,
of, yeah, not really good priorities there. And he hasn't mentioned dad,
it's true.
I don't know, where is dad off the hook, or maybe he's not really communicative.
Maybe dad's more passive and mom kind of runs the show.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't know if they've always been obsessed with their church, but I don't know. I guess if it's been, since COVID first started coming out, it's been going on for a couple years.
Yeah.
So, wow.
The way he phrased like they're obsessed with their church
Yeah.
made it sound like this was ongoing. Like this wasn't some new thing where this was the Christmas party that we could not miss, party of the year. It sounds like
Hmm.
this is maybe a repeated pattern of behavior for at least mom or mom and dad.
Yeah. And I think to agree to go pick up the kids and not tell anybody that you're about
Or
to
not
leave them.
say like, well, I have a Christmas party at this time. I can't miss it because I'm heading it up, or,
Yeah, especially like 12 and 9, they're probably not going to burn down the house or something. But if they're scared, if dad's sick, mom's in the hospital, they probably saw their parents really distressed.
yeah,
And then to be left home alone, that would be awful,
terrifying.
And
I
I,
could imagine thoughts of being orphaned, like running through their heads, like,
yeah,
who the fuck am I going to live with now? Like, I
seriously.
grew up in a single parent home and I had that thought a lot of times, like randomly, like, God, if my mom died, where would I go?
I had two available parents, and I used to worry. I remember telling my parents, like, hey, if you guys die, I would tell them who I wanted to go live with. I was worried about being orphaned. I had no reason to be. But like that's a legitimate concern there, and I think to like just minimize the whole emergency to the point where you don't even communicate that you have no intentions of watching somebody's children. It's like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
That's
She probably should have said
wild.
no.
Yeah, just say no instead
Or
of
I
doing
can
all
pick them up
the
and take them XYZ, or I can keep them
yeah.
for an hour.
And then like your brother needs to come pick them up or
Yeah.
whatever.
But
Yeah,
to
so
say
shitty.
yes and give the appearance that she's going to keep them the full amount of time, the whole whopping 3 hours,
Yeah, and you don't know about that until your kid's calling you
in tears.
scared. I would
Yes.
be infuriated. That's crazy. He was kind of asking at the end, did he put too strong of a boundary? Can you kind of give us a quick review of like rigid boundaries and what that might look like?
When we differentiate between like rigid, assertive, and loose, I think one thing is the flexibility.
Mm,
Flexibility comes in with the rigid versus assertive distinction. So if the situation changes, does the boundary change? Do we take that into consideration at least? Maybe the boundary does end up staying the same, but we at least considered it and played that through. The ability to enforce our boundaries is probably the distinction between loose and rigid, or even like loose and assertive. So
mm-hmm.
are we going to hold this boundary in place? So for him, that would be, are we telling mom she's not going to really be around the kids, but then she's watching them every other weekend for us?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, the boundary, that's a big boundary to say you can't be around
Mhm.
my family, right? But he's being, it sounds like, firm in its implementation.
Yes. I don't know if I would necessarily say that this is a firm rule when we're thinking about assertive versus rigid, but I think in this particular post, we could look at time frame.
Mm,
He's not saying, I'm done with you. Like, don't call me. Don't expect to see your grandkids again. He's not saying that. What he is saying is, for this really high stress period of my life, these
mhm.
next few months, I can't be in contact with you. I can't have you around me or my kids. And I
Yeah.
think that's an important piece of this story to help us determine if this is a rigid or too strong boundary, or if this is just a firm boundary.
Yeah, because he's not saying we're having no relationship, maybe, or this is
Mhm.
permanently damaged. And I
Yeah.
think it is okay in an assertive boundary. Sometimes I think we can kind of overdo a little bit on consequences. And I think it's okay, even if we don't have like a timeline established, to say, hey, until further notice, this is what I need to have happen. I don't necessarily know how long this is going to go on right now. And I think we want clarity around boundary setting, but I think it is okay to leave some points kind of open-ended, like timelines, for example.
Yeah.
you know
Which again, he didn't even do that. He just kind of said, until this is all over, then I'm going to reassess. So I imagine he would give some updated communication at that point as to how he's feeling about it all.
Yeah, because this was July or December of 2022. His surgery is in July of 2023. So
3 to 4 weeks for recovery. Be like
after
August,
that.
September.
I might be overgeneralizing, right? We don't know mom or what mom or dad's like, but if I was the OP, I would feel like my mom has given me a pattern that she doesn't really seem to care very much, especially if her main motivation is for like the perception of other people. I think to continue to have her around is also kind of tolerating somebody really not giving a shit about you,
Yeah.
So I think he was right to say, you're obviously not in a good headspace about this. We don't need you around. Like you're causing problems. You're not really helpful. I think that was
Yeah,
good to
for
do.
sure.
He's just asking for space, basically, which is a boundary where it's like, I don't necessarily know what's going to happen yet with this, but like, you kind of need to leave me the hell alone for a little bit because you and I are not cool right now. You kind of messed up,
Yeah.
So a rigid boundary in this would look like he said that maybe the relationship ended or
Yeah.
something like that.
Space, I feel like he's not even cutting off all points of communication. Right. I think he's just really saying, like, you're not going to be responsible for watching my kids. I really don't want you over at my house every time you are around, is the word that he used. It adds stress and things get very complicated. So there's still a potential that the relationship is still going to be intact, where maybe they can call or FaceTime or video chat with the grandkids during this time. You're just not going to like physically be in my space. So just kind of off of the words he used in the post, I guess I maybe get the sense that we're not going full no contact for the next 7 to 8 months.
Yeah.
I just don't want you like physically around.
Yeah, so that's a good point too, where we can kind of have gray areas on what it means to take space, where he's maybe setting up, we're not going to be physically like in the same environment, but we can maybe still have some kind of line of communication open.
Yeah.
And having some nuance there too.
And I could even see where maybe the kids want to talk to her, but maybe as the parent and the child of her, I don't really want to have that conversation with her.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here, grandma's calling, pick it up. Like, I'm not even going to answer that phone call. I'm going to hand the phone to the kids. So talk to grandma for a little bit.
And I like too, because this is his mom. He seems to have pretty good intuition on the boundary setting. If I was his wife, I might have lost my shit, and he did a good job at taking the lead, I think, and having pretty good clarity on what the problems were there.
Yeah.
Because from an in-law perspective, I might not be as gracious than if it was my own mom,
That's very true. I've talked about kind of the emotional flooding. And I think like your wife going in for emergency surgery, she's septic. You're also going through your own health shit. So you're not at 100. I could easily see him being emotionally flooded at this point.
For sure.
And I think his like parental instincts like kicked in and all of that other shit just went to the side. And he like problem solved the shit out of that.
Seriously,
and I think you could like freeze in that moment, like, fuck, what do I do? And he was like, I'm just going to call my brother. And what a nice brother that his brother's just like, I have to go pick up my nibblings.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah. And he seems to have a good, or at least with his brother, he seems to have a good kind of assessment of who's able to contribute in what ways, so hey, my brother makes the most sense because logistically he's closer, availability or whatever. It's like, he won't be off work. And I mean, for the level of problem solving that he did in that crisis, I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's not like he had his wife around to help him with any of that.
Yeah. I don't know if you got this sense, but I almost get the sense that even in this particular situation, he was not relying on mom. It wasn't like, Mom, can you keep the kids overnight?
Yeah.
It was, I need you to keep them for about 3 hours until my brother can come pick them up once he's off work.
So that maybe he already had some suspicion that mom was not best suited to be relied on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, why are we doing kind of a transfer of kids? I
Right.
don't know if, like, mom works or not, but
Mm-hmm.
especially if mom's not working, okay, maybe school's a little bit further. We're not asking you to do this for, like, months and months.
Just overnight or
Just
a
overnight,
day or
yeah.
two or something. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But to just really have her do the emergency pickup of the kids after school, hold them for a couple of hours until the brother can get off work, I get the impression, even in this situation, he did not feel confident in mom's ability to have her as the main caregiver. She's just kind of the temporary placeholder babysitter in this situation.
So maybe mom has a pattern of being unreliable, and he was kind of in a jam and had to make it work. But
Which I think would
yeah.
speak to his comment earlier as far as like the church always comes first. Maybe this isn't the first situation where she said no to helping or to watching the kids because of a church function.
And I think it's so twisted. If I was at a adult only church party and a mid-60-year-old woman said, "Yeah, I just had to be here, so I left children at home alone," I'd be like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Like that is like the most, or like prioritize church over your family. I'm like, that is like the most fucked off way of like thinking about that.
That's like the
You know?
extreme of like putting God first.
Yeah, like this like bizarre, like dogmatic of totally missing the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, I have to assume she did not tell them her grandchildren were at home or the situation under which they got to be to her house, one or the other. Because there is no universe in which a normal person would hear that and think, God, you're such a good grandma. And she's so worried about what other people are going to think at the end of the post that there's no way they knew this was going down. She had to keep that under her belt, which then also meant she knew how shady it was. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep it a secret. She knew it looked bad.
Yeah. Because on the other end, she's like, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about this emergency situation, but if I don't get to take care of them when you're recovering, then it's going to look bad. So she's already planning how she's going to talk to other people about this, and
she's already told them and said, oh, well, I'll keep them when he's, in the hospital, and there'll be 3 to 4 weeks of recovery. So it'll be a big task for me with these two, young, energetic kids.
Like almost kind of like martyring herself kind of a little bit. Oh, yeah, we don't know what those conversations look like. Really, she's kind of using, it sounds like, the family's emergency as a show, like as an opportunity to demonstrate things where it's not of actual like altruism or genuine concern. It's all about like a game being played to control public perception, which I think is so shitty for how sick her son and his family are.
This is like textbook external validation. Where like your self-esteem and your sense of confidence and self-worth comes from external factors. So for her, it's what other people are thinking of her versus just saying, I really don't care if people think less of me because I didn't go to this Christmas party.
You would think.
For her, she needed the validation of going to the party. And so that's what got prioritized.
Yeah, I think you are right about that. I feel like even with clients, I find that if there's some kind of, chronic pain issue or like illnesses, it is common that one family member seems to just not get that it's serious and has patterns of kind of like minimizing even. Do you find that that's true too? I feel like that's like indicative that like they're probably not going to be relied upon if they minimize your reality,
Yes.
I see that happen.
And I think it could be hard to understand because some of chronic issues are what's kind of referred to as like invisible diseases where things kind of look okay from the outside.
Yeah.
Like I have a friend with Crohn's disease. So from the outside, I mean, she looks fine. If she's not having a flare up, she's out and about running her kids to like all their 40 million different activities that they're in. But when she's out, she's out. And it can be hard to think of such a drastic difference from being up and about and happy and cheerful and on the go to not being able to move.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't necessarily get that.
I think like it is common if people don't understand something, they'll kind of like minimize it. Dialysis means that we have to filter your blood for you because your kidneys don't work. That's a major thing to have, and if they don't understand that, I think it can kind of minimize it. It's like, well, it's not that serious, but that would be kind of red flag 101 of I'd be like, hey, you seem to be really oblivious to how serious this is. This is
Yeah.
a life or death thing, So for somebody to can just even kind of, I think, minimize, there might be boundaries even of that,
Yeah.
of like, you're pretty disrespectful and kind of oblivious to what I'm going through. And that makes me
Mhm.
feel alone. That's
Or
not
maybe
how.
because there's a treatment plan available, like there's a quote unquote
Oh.
cure. Like we do dialysis and this will hold you over until you get a kidney. Maybe because he's been functioning, she doesn't necessarily understand the severity. People go like years and years and years waiting on transplant organs. You have to wait for one to become available. There's a list of hierarchy. So if you don't understand like the medical side of this, you've watched zero medical dramas in your entire life,
Mm-hmm.
have zero preconception of it. Maybe
Yeah.
it seems like, oh, well, they have an answer. We know what to do. We just kind of have to wait around.
No big deal.
No big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or on the reverse, if this might sound bad, if she's over relying on faith and just saying, well, everything
God
will
will
work
fix
out the
it.
way God wants it to work out. Like for you, that may be comforting, but I imagine for him, when he's thinking about not being around for his wife and his kids,
Yeah.
I think that can be a real push of faith and a struggle to relinquish that control over to a higher
Mhm.
power to say, I'm just not going to worry about it. You're worried about it. So to have your mom pass this off as this seemingly insignificant medical procedure, like that's a problem.
Yeah. And I think, if anybody, any listener has, a family with some kind of serious condition, I think educating yourself is part of being a good support system. I think it
Mhm.
shows that you're concerned, that you're interested. And so I do think that mom and dad needed to really have more intention to like really understand what was going on with them, And yeah,
Absolutely.
like how dismissive of being like, well, God will take care of it, so don't worry about it. It's like, it doesn't mean that I'm not suffering, that I'm not scared. I
Mhm.
just think that that's not very helpful there. I want to talk about kind of the in therapy we call it the natural support system. So the people that clients have in their life that they're not paying services for, right? So a therapist is not included because we're a professional, but like, your family members, your loved ones, that'd be people in your natural support system. And I like using the analogy of like basketball. So I told clients, I said, hey, you got like your starting lineup. These are you're going to be your highest performing players, and they all kind of have their role on the court. They know where they're supposed to be positioned, all those things. But if you just run the starting five all season, they're going to get injured. They're going to get burnt out. Like you have to have a deep bench coming off,
Mhm.
So when you think about people in your life and who you're going to rely on, it's really important to not just have one person that you're burdening all of these issues with. Like you're going to have people who are better logistical planners, problem solvers. You're going to have people who are more emotionally available and are good at different things. And we have to have realistic expectations about our support system. And then also we need to have like a deep bench because we need to spread out our needs to people who are best equipped. And
Mhm.
I think he did, he get a little taste of that. Of mom was obviously, oh God, this isn't ideal. She's in a pinch. She can come off. She dropped the ball, right? She's about to get dropped down to the G League. But I think the brother is somebody that he knows his kind of availability and reliability, and
Mhm.
I think he's doing his best job to put kind of aces in their places to
Yeah.
have the right people play the roles that best fit. Yeah. Do you find that people tend to have a deep bench?
No,
I
not at all.
Nobody
I
does.
could answer that quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not so much that they don't have a deep bench, but again, I work with a lot of like passive or people pleasing
Mm.
folks. And so they're hesitant to use their bench. Maybe they have a great bench
Mm.
full of all stars
Mm-hmm.
and they just don't want to be a burden on them.
Yeah.
And so they're never really offloading their struggles or their problems. They're constantly taking on because they're listening to their deep bench and it's not being a reciprocal relationship. So I think more people probably have a deep bench, but I don't think people feel as comfortable utilizing everybody on their bench.
Yeah. Then they're out there dribbling the ball by themselves on the court, being like, nobody helps me.
Yes.
Oh, damn.
You got like 50 people on the bench, like, put me in.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the way of figuring out who's best at what is to give people chances. Is that
Yeah.
is that how you would say that that's developed?
Mm-hmm. and
Yeah.
give feedback. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if somebody gives you unsupportive feedback, give them feedback right back. Well, what I was actually needing from you was this.
Yeah.
Or tell them up front. Like, I don't need problem solve. I just need somebody to listen. Right now, I just need to vent and get this off my chest. And I don't want you to come back with 15 solutions for me.
Good
Saying what
point.
you need up front, or maybe you don't know what you need until you don't get it. Give them that feedback.
I like that. So we both have to like know what our different people are good at, but then we have to ask for what we need too, because they're not mind readers and they might not really know what we need out of
Maybe
that.
they're really good at it. They just don't think that's what you need.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So they're trying to mind read for you as well and give you what
Mm-hmm.
they think you need.
I see that happen a lot. Wow. I think mom was kind of pulling a little bit of guilt strings a little bit. Do you think she was trying to enforce some inappropriate guilt on him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Tell our listeners what inappropriate guilt is.
Guilt in general, as an emotion, the function of guilt is to tell us when we've broken a rule. So that can be an internal rule, a rule in the family of origin, whatever that comes up. So it tells us we've broken a rule. So what inappropriate guilt is that we feel guilty for a rule that is not an appropriate rule to have, right? So maybe we don't air our family dirty laundry to other people. So sometimes if somebody maybe talks about a family of origin issue, they feel guilty, where that rule shouldn't be there in the first place, because that shows that there's secrets that are being kept and it's keeping things sick by having privacy. But because we've been kind of coached and groomed into that our whole life, that makes us feel wrong. So, we're in therapy, if somebody's having, like, I think mom guilt is a big one.
Yep.
Of, you need to be super productive and your house needs to be immaculate and your kid can never be on screen time or whatever, all these rules, and so that when we break them, we feel inappropriate guilt. So I think what's happening here is mom's playing a little bit of the, you're going to make me look bad. You're obviously some kind of wrong for depriving me of a caretaking role. And I think the OP does a good job at being like, that is not something that I need to be worried about. And like, that is just a level of focus that is completely like fucked up. So I don't feel the need to rescue you from your lack of external validation. I mean, maybe some people would have been like, or he does have a little inappropriate guilt because he is saying, am I being an asshole?
Yeah.
Maybe I think he is. Maybe he didn't express that to mom, but internally it sounds like he's probably having some guilt,
Yeah. I think I add into that explanation with my clients is we're feeling guilt for rules that we aren't involved in keeping or breaking.
Okay. Yep.
And so the one I get a lot along with mom guilt, like, oh, my kids did this. Like, well, you can't really control what your kids do. You can attempt to teach them and influence, provide consequences. But at the end of the day, they're their own person and you don't have control over that. So we need to minimize some of our guilt and assess, like, what did we do? Did we teach them not to steal? Yes. Did we give them a consequence for stealing? Yes. The rest is on them. You're a good parent.
So even kind of maybe it pushes us towards kind of like enabling or some codependent kind of behavior sometimes when we're taking that on.
I get this the most, though, with this type of situation where we try to take on responsibility for other people's emotional states.
Yeah.
And we have zero control over what or how other people are feeling. We can say something with the purest of intentions and they perceive that incorrectly and their feelings get hurt.
Yeah.
Like, you don't necessarily have to feel guilty for saying what you said.
Yeah.
You can maybe apologize for the way it was perceived, maybe apologize for not communicating it correctly. But at the end of the day, how they feel is only within their control.
That's really true. I think that comes up. I think that is a big pitfall in boundary setting in general, is people are like, well, they don't like it when I set boundaries, Well, most people don't like being told that they can't do something, right? Or they're not going to get something. And so I think, that can even be a big thing of, kind of falling on the sword and trying to manage the emotions of others because we don't want to, quote unquote, inflict harm on somebody when really it's their own emotional reaction is for them to manage.
Yes.
What you're saying there?
Mhm.
Yeah. Ugh, mom just infuriates me. Anything in particular you feel like went really well here? I think like the deep bench was one thing that I think
Mhm.
went well. What else do you think?
I think setting the boundary, he talks about this as, am I setting a strong boundary with my mom? And I almost feel as though he's implying there should be like a too strong boundary
Mm,
phrase in there. Like he's
mhm.
worried this boundary is too rigid. But I
Yeah.
think he did a good job of setting an assertive boundary where there is some flexibility. He's not saying
Mhm.
forever, I'm done with you. He's just kind
Yeah.
of protecting his space and energy at this particular time when it's a decreased resource for him because he's fighting health stuff. Wife is dealing with health stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think not taking on a lot of that guilt. He may have
Mhm.
enough that he's reaching out to Reddit, but not enough that he's getting rid of the boundary. He's not going back and saying, well, you're right. I am making you look bad.
Yeah, and I think like I think to that point, if he had done anything less than that, I'd almost say that that would have been too soft, because I think
Yes.
the level of offense that happened here is kind of extreme,
Mm-hmm.
given, hey, you have a pattern of really minimizing emergencies,
Yep.
and that's I my family is not safe around you,
Mm-hmm.
talk
I
about
think
health
he's
and
doing
safety.
I think he's doing a good job of reprioritizing his roles. Growing
Yeah,
up, he's in the child role. Now he's in the parental role, and his priority should be his children over his mother, in my personal opinion.
yep,
Right?
yep.
Because they're dependent on you for a lot of their needs to be met at this age, whereas
Mhm.
mom's full grown. She's completely capable of meeting her needs.
Yeah,
He's not really worried what that does to mom, but he's also
totally.
not inflicting pain or harm.
Mm-hmm. She's the mom. She obviously has two sons, right? Because he has a brother. For
Mhm.
your other son to have to step in because you fucked up so bad, like how does the level of
Yeah, the
density that
least
she has?
work.
Yeah, like your kids are having to clean up like your bad
Yeah.
priorities, and she just seems to have no ownership of, why might people be responding to me in this way? Why might
Mhm.
people find me to be unreliable? Like, yeah, no accountability there, huh?
No insight.
No insight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is another kind of testament to his just problem solving even during a state of crisis, because one thing that goes when you're emotionally flooding is we can forfeit the right time, right place kind of situation,
Mhm.
and maybe he wasn't at the hospital even, I don't know, but if he hadn't been able to have a little space from that, he could have just been flying off the hill going ape shit in the waiting room, but it sounds like he was good at like getting the logistics sorted out and
Mhm.
making sure that things were handled. So I'm impressed with his
Yeah,
crisis response in
absolutely.
general. Yeah. So, he said basically, give me space. I don't want you around. You're adding more stress. This is not conducive to recovery for me or my family. If they were to do some kind of reconciliation
Mhm.
or even, a recircling back, what do you think? What would you like to see that look like?
I don't necessarily know if there needs to be a ton of reconciliation because it's not a no contact situation. They're
Okay.
still going to be involved. I think if they wanted to revisit maybe mom helping out with some caretaking responsibilities for the grandkids, perhaps we just kind of test that out and do small increments of time. Or if I'm going to leave my kids with you, I need to know your plans for the day.
Yeah. Okay. Just so we
Be
don't
like,
end up in another surprise Christmas party.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so reconciliation may just look like me taking more of an active role in obtaining the information I needed instead of relying on mom to change her communication habits.
Okay.
So I might just kind of accept her as she is and just change how I interact with her.
That's a good perspective. So you'd be more focused maybe on kind of going forward as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to cleaning up the damage that's been done. You say, okay, now that we know that mom's inclined to do this, I'm going to react differently in the
Yeah.
future.
And maybe
Okay.
just setting some additional expectations with her as far as if you watch my kids, I expect you to be there for the full amount of time. And if you're
Mm,
not going to or you can't, I expect you to communicate that with me.
okay. That seems reasonable. I might have a, I might have a hard time moving past that unless somebody, is she indicate, I think I might need some ownership coming out of
Mm,
this. what I would be getting out of her helping with childcare seems to be pretty minimal. I'd be putting in a lot of work to make sure that she's trustworthy, where I'd be like, you need to show me that you're trustworthy. I don't want to necessarily have to work that hard for that. So I think I might say, like, it's going to be really hard for me to have a relationship with you if you're not seemingly aware of how this might have made me feel or how this might have impacted my family. Because if you're not able to own up for that, then like, we're not going to be that close, you know?
I think it helps you to know if they've learned anything. And I think that's valuable information when you're trying to make decisions about how you interact with somebody in the future. Like, do they actually know why I'm upset with them? Do they understand that? Or are they just saying sorry to get back into my good graces?
Yeah, and that's what I guess, coming back, it'd be kind of like if on the bench the same player keeps making the same mistake over and over again, I'd be like, if you don't change his behavior, you're not going to get to play anymore. Or I would just say there's not going to be any kind of, I can't rely on you in any way, so you're welcome to come over for like, family events or something, but you're not dependable. So overall, what's the verdict? Is he the asshole? What do you think?
No, he is not the asshole.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say this is a strong boundary. His initial, am I the asshole question? Am I an asshole for setting a strong boundary with my mom? This isn't a strong boundary. This is a boundary.
Yeah, I think it's proportionate. It's an appropriate boundary, I think. That was a big offense that happened, So summarize for us, what did we learn through this post today?
Today we learned about rigid boundaries and things to consider when wondering if your boundary is too rigid. Is it appropriate for the context of the situation? Is there some flexibility in there if things change? Are we using absolutes? So like, I'm never going to talk to you again, or are we leaving some room for reconciliation? We talked about having a deep bench, knowing your support system, giving your support system an opportunity to support you, and taking the time to learn what they're good at, or offering them feedback to see if they can be good at what you actually need them to do. And don't take on guilt for things that are outside of your control or are inappropriate rules that really shouldn't be there in the first place.
I agree. Well summarized.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Any closing thoughts for our listeners?
I don't think so. I think you summarized everything. Yeah.
All right, guys, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Send them to us at assertivepodcast@gmail.com. And until next time.